Welcome, Applaud.
And welcome back into TCM Pod. Chris Mathis alongside Spencer Mathis once more. Thank you guys for checking us out as you have been over the last couple of weeks as well, as we got a lot to get into today, including the latest situation on NFL running backs and the contract situation. Training camp officially gets underway this week right here in Tampa Bay. For example, one team that's getting underway Wednesday, the Bucs get back to action, as are several other teams across the National Football League, Spence. And also a very minute Barbie movie review we'll get into as well. I know it was hot topic this weekend. We'll share that a little bit later on in the podcast. And, I heard your rating was, we'll get into that, though, here momentarily. But again, Chris Mathis back here with you guys on this episode of the Chris Mathis podcast. And want to remind you to follow us on social media at TCM_pod. And, one thing that we've been following, speaking of following, is the latest regarding NFL running back, Spence, and their issues with their contracts. And it was, a little bit of talk here over the last couple of weeks. And then last week, it really took off as far as not only fans and reporters and maybe even some coaches thinking that running backs are underpaid, but now the running backs are speaking out in the National Football League. And that's crazy. You've never seen a guild quite like this, because they do have the NFLPA Players Association, in which they are able to talk about their issues with contracts, really anything regarding the NFL. But now the players have actually met up themselves, and in particular, the running back, Spence, as some of the top running backs in the NFL held a private meeting on Zoom on Saturday to discuss their issues. Now, this was organized by Chargers running back, of course, Austin Eckler. And it also included running backs like Christian McCaffrey, Nick Chubb, Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, and Derrick Henry. And this discussion was one in which did not really come with any action. It was more so just discussing their frustration with the contract situation. And Nick Chubb of the Browns said that we're kind of handcuffed with the situation. We're the only position that our production hurts us. And these are his words. If we go out there and run for 2,000 yards with so many carries, the next year they're going to say, you're probably wore down. It's tough. It hurts us at the end of the day. So, Spence, before we dive more into this, what are your initial reactions to NFL running backs and their frustrations with contracts and, them holding a meeting on their own via Zoom over the weekend to talk about their issues with contracts?
Yeah, I had this conversation earlier with a guy that I work with named Lou, and we were talking about how NFL running backs, the very talented ones are just so much better than the very low ones. But then again, there's not that, like, if you think of the position of running back, you think of the gap in between the best running back in the NFL and then the 32nd starter in the NFL. And then you think of, if you compare that to the quarterback position, where you're looking at Patrick Mahomes versus the 32 rated quarterback, it's just such a bigger jump or drop off when you're looking at quarterbacks than if you're looking at running backs. And the same thing goes with the amount of money that these guys are being paid. Of course, running backs deserve to be paid at least to a second contract. But their shelf life is just nowhere near as long as a quarterback, because a running back at best has 8 years in the league of good football. And then after that, you have nothing. So with a quarterback, you come into the league at 21. If you're very, very good, you can play until you're about 40. Of course, Brady being the outlier at 45. But even Aaron Rodgers right now, about to be 39 years old, he's still playing good. But give or take, I would say 2 or 3 more years left for Aaron Rodgers. But for him, that means that he's been a starter in the league for almost 20 years. You look at a running back, Adrian Peterson, drafted in 2007, had already fallen off by the year 2016, and he was an outlier there as well, lasting for 9 really good seasons in the NFL, even with the torn ACL. But that's another thing with running backs, is they can have their best season of their career. The next year they go out there and blow their ACL, tear up their knee, and if they're not one of the best guys like Christian McCaffrey or Derrick Henry, guys that have had injuries and prevailed, especially McCaffrey, then you're not going to come back. Because I'm looking at guys like Jonathan Taylor, who put up 2,000 yards just 2 years ago, was not good last year. And then you kind of look at the offensive line from the year where Jonathan Taylor ran for 2,000 yards. And then you look at the offensive line from the year last year, whenever the Colts had a bottom 5 offensive line in the NFL, aside from Quentin Nelson. So really, it kind of, the more you look into it, the more you feel bad for running backs. But at the same time, you cannot go against what these NFL owners and GMs are going to try and pay these guys, because they don't last long, and one injury could ruin them. So it's a tough spot for running backs. It's a very tough spot they're in. But whenever you go back and look at old contracts of running backs that have recently been paid, like Todd Gurley, Jonathan Taylor still looking for a contract, guys like that, they get injured and there's really nothing left. Like Todd Gurley could have been a generational running back, but guess what? He lasted in the NFL for 4 or 5 years max. And his last 2 years with St. Louis, whenever they were still St. Louis, were not great. So he's a guy that was out of the league very fast. The NFL running backs' primes are just so fast compared to any other position that you see. Of course, they get hit more than anybody. I mean, they're touching the ball almost as much as anybody. They're second to the quarterback in the center. Those two kind of are intertwined. But other than that, I mean, they're touching the ball so much. They're getting hit so often, and they're not lasting long. And that's a thing that is going to go with the running back position, because if you think about how replaceable a running back is, think over the last 3 years who have been the running backs of the Super Bowl winning teams. You have the Kansas City Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco. You have the Rams in 2022. Cam Akers was their second back, and then their number one back in the Super Bowl year was cut by week 7 of the next season. And then you look at the Buccaneers running back core in 2021, and you have Leonard Fournette, who's gone from the team already, and you also have Ronald Jones, who's basically out of the NFL already, and those two were the lead. Running backs are good. They're good for bad teams, but they're not there for the best teams in the NFL. You do not have to have a good running game to win a Super Bowl, and that's been the thing, I would say, for at least the last 3 or 4 years, maybe even going further back. I can't think further back than that. But even during the Patriots dynasty, did they ever have a running back that was top 5 in the league? No.
LeGarrette Blount was it. Yeah. And he wasn't top 5 by any means. He just had a lot of 1 or 2 yard rushing touchdowns.
So in my opinion, you feel for the running backs. That's a thing that everyone says. But at the same time, you don't need a good running game to win. All you need is a good offensive line and a running back that's willing to take hits for 4 years and get paid maybe even the vet minimum. And I think that's the way that the league is going to trend moving forward, unless we have a huge draft class soon. And hopefully for this draft class that just came out with Jahmyr Gibbs and Bijan Robinson, you hope that they really pan out if you're the running back position.
Yeah, and again, we're talking about the NFL running backs and their issues with contracts right now. And, you know, I looked up and I know that the average lifespan of an NFL player in the NFL, 3.3 years. Okay, that's pretty short in itself. Then you take it one step further and you look at running backs, less than 3 years in the NFL. 2.57 years is the average length of NFL running back, which is unbelievable. Now, on the flip side, a kicker, punter, the average lifespan. Now, keep in mind, these are for average players, all combined into with the great ones. But a quarterback, for example, 4.4 years in comparison to 2.57 years. So you take it to the next level regarding the big-time quarterbacks, and yeah, that number is even that much more drastic in comparison to the difference of a lifespan between a quarterback and a running back. And you know, we talk about the fact that they do touch the ball a lot, Spence, just like a center and or a quarterback will almost every single play. But more importantly, when they are running the football, they get hit by not 1 or 2 guys, but they're getting dogpiled 3, 4 guys every play. And on top of that, when they don't have the ball, they're still expected to block and pick up the Mike linebacker who's coming right at the quarterback and trying to knock him off his feet. There's so many different variables that weigh into this, in addition to the fact that there's no real lead running back anymore. I feel like the value of the running back has dropped off. The appreciation, at least, of the running back has dropped off simply because they expect a 2-headed monster. And that's kind of the thing moving forward. So Saquon Barkley looking for his next contract opportunity there with the New York Giants. And for me, I think that I would imagine you would pay him simply because of his talent, his skill set, but the injuries have added up. And when you think about the offense and the Giants, if you take him away from the Giants, their offense is terrible. So he does need to sign that franchise tag without a doubt, or else he's in trouble regarding what his future looks like there with the New York Giants. So it is frustrating because as we read the comments earlier from Nick Chubb about, you know, a player rushing for 2,000 yards in the next season, it could hurt them because they're thinking, hey, you know, we ran you into the ground last year. You may get hurt. You may have less value this season. It is frustrating because that's their job. Their job is to run the football, is to take a pounding. And you know what? I mean, just to see them not get the love and the respect that they deserve is frustrating. However, it seems as if that's kind of the way the NFL has worked for a couple of years now, and they just know it's next man up mentality.
Yeah, and another big thing to look at is the character issues that the really good running backs have seemed to have recently over the last 10 years. You look first at Adrian Peterson, and then you turn your attention to Alvin Kamara, and now the Dalvin Cook allegations that are coming out. And before that, I can't remember the running back in college that did something. I can't exactly remember exactly what the running back's name,
Garrett
but
Blunt, he punched somebody in college,
yeah,
and he punched somebody in the NFL too.
Joe Mixon also punched a lady that was caught on camera at a bar. I mean, right in front of him, somebody that was sitting in a booth with. I mean, that's another thing with the running backs is a ton of character issues have also kind of gone down in terms of who wants to sign them. Because if this was a normal season and Dalvin Cook didn't have all these allegations, I think he would have been signed last month. Instead, he's looking at getting less money than what he probably would have got just 2 or 3 years ago, or maybe even just last year if these allegations wouldn't have kind of piled up on him. I mean, they've been looming over his head for a couple of years now, but with the recent evidence that this lady has shown, it's not looking good for him. Of course, he'll probably get out of it, but at the same time, the fans know what he did. It's kind of like if it gets as bad as it could be, it would be kind of like the situation in Cleveland with their quarterback, Deshaun Watson.
And again, we're talking about the running backs in the National Football League. You guys can opine and tweet us at TCM_pod. Leave a comment down below because your feedback does matter, and we'll definitely get to you guys as well. Now, Ekeler, he's just the 7th player since the 1970 AFL-NFL merger to lead the league in both touchdowns scored in consecutive seasons. That's incredible, and for him not to have received a contract extension from the Chargers is a bit shocking. And on top of that, yeah, he did want to trade, or the Chargers were willing to trade him, but they were unable to really field any interest in a trade or a realistic trade offer because of his position. So if that doesn't tell you enough right there, I don't know what will regarding the NFL running back position.
Yeah, it really is just kind of a spot where the running backs are kind of screwed here because Eckler's a good running back, but again, at the same time, one big injury would be the end of his career. He's getting up there in age. Same thing goes for Derrick Henry. And then even at this point, Christian McCaffrey's only been in the league for, 5 years now, and he's one more injury for him, he's done. And that's why no one wants to really sign or spend a lot of money, at least, on Saquon Barkley because he's already torn his ACL. If he does something like that again, that spells the end of his career. So these guys have been lucky enough to basically get a second contract or at least play for 5 years in the NFL. The big hurdle for running backs right now is they want to get a second contract. That's their big thing. But with the 5th-year option being in place for the guys that were first-round picks like Saquon Barkley, like Dalvin Cook, like Derrick Henry was, the 5th-year option is really, really screwing over these running backs because they're having to go one more trial year, and then teams can use them as much as they want. And then after that, do they really want to re-sign you after they've ran you 300 times for 2,000 yards in a season, even though you put up those numbers? You've taken too many hits, like you said at the beginning of this podcast. And that's the thing with running backs is I really don't see an end to this unless running backs can become even more prototypical in the pass game, like Christian McCaffrey there on the screen. Nick Chubb is not one of those guys, but he's one of the best runners in the league. But I think running backs are going to have to continue to transition more into a Christian McCaffrey role where they can catch the ball more. Of course, McCaffrey's a good blocker. That's an important thing. But these one-dimensional running backs are kind of being pushed out of the way, aside from Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb.
Yeah, and you know what's kind of surprising to me is the fact that the Falcons, they took Bijan Robinson at number 8. Now, we know that he's that freak athlete from Texas. The running back had a phenomenal career there at Texas with the Longhorns, and also is a guy that's a threat out of the backfield catching the football too, which is also something that we haven't mentioned yet, Spence, is the fact that they're able to be a wide receiver, a weapon out of the backfield. And sometimes they have to block off the snap and then go out for a pass and try to, pick up some yards too, which just adds to their beatdown of their bodies. And that's why this position is always beat up and why guys don't really play full seasons at a high level, because it is high impact from the get-go, from the jump, beginning with training camp, really, which begins across the National Football League last week for some teams and this week too. But Bijan Robinson taking pick number 8, I felt like, teams drafting running backs so high was a thing of the past, especially with what's going on with the contract situation and injuries. But Robinson was an outlier. Do you feel like, players getting picked that high at the running back position is going to be few and far in between moving forward? Or if there's a talent like Bijan Robinson, no matter what, they're going to take him, even if it is top 8, top 10?
Yeah, I wouldn't go ahead and put the term generational talent on Bijan Robinson, but he's near that. So I mean, he was projected by NFL scouts to be a top 10 pick, which is an outlier for NFL running backs at this point. I think the last one before that I can remember is Josh Jacobs in 2018, and now he's looking for his second contract. But with a team like Atlanta who loves to run the football, they're going to have a second-year quarterback who's basically a rookie with his only 4 starts last season. I think the run game is important for them, and I think it's going to pan out well for them because they already have 2 or 3 other running backs in Algier. You've also got Cordero Patterson still on the team if you want to go into the passing game. And I think that's kind of what has to be done. And even for Bijan Robinson, I think maybe 10 years ago, running backs always wanted to have the ball. At this point, I think running backs do not mind splitting carries. Of course, it's going to hurt people in terms of fantasy where you want to pick a running back, but splitting carries is the new trend in the NFL. And with the replaceability of NFL running backs now, I think that's going to it's going to have to be how it's going to go if these running backs want to get paid, because they know if they take one other hit below the knee that could dislodge something, or if they tear their ACL, they could be done. And that's the thing with running backs, is they're not as protected as a quarterback. And if you're going to do that, it's going to hurt the game. So they will never, ever, ever be as protected as the quarterback. So it's a tough position. There's, of course, going to be few and far between top 10 picks. And I think even now there's going to be few and far between that are getting a 4-year contract after their rookie deal expires and they've gotten their 5th-year option picked up. I think the new wave for the NFL is running backs are probably going to be 100% done by the age of 30 after we get past maybe McCaffrey, he might make it past, and maybe Derrick Henry, he might make it past. And then one other guy on the screen right there is Nick Chubb, who will make it past because he's been in a 2-duo backfield for a couple of years now with Kareem Hunt.
Again, if you're just now joining us here on the Chris Mathis podcast, it is brought to you by Ivy Log Meat Processing. All the information is down below in the description. And you know what? You can give them a call today, 706-745-0011, or visit them online, ivylogmeatprocessing.com. That is ivylogmeatprocessing.com. They're also on Facebook, too. They make this show possible each and every week, and we do appreciate them. And very excited for our partnership with Ivy Log Meat Processing there in Blairsville. And Spence, we round out the podcast with final thoughts on the movie. I know you saw Barbie this weekend, and I reached out, with a 1 to 10 rating. Why don't you just go ahead and let the audience know about the Barbie movie? And I know you could easily go all in on this movie, but take it a little easy. I know our audience, we've got some younger folk out there that watch this. So, unravel into the Barbie movie. I think it surpassed Oppenheimer so far at the first week box office.
Yeah, the amount of hype for the Barbie movie, I think, has kind of putting on some shades for people in terms of seeing that this movie is not great. I think it's a very entertaining movie. I think about an hour in, you're kind of pulled out of the movie with how many random dance scenes there are. Another thing is, if you have kids that are under the age of 10 and you want to go take your daughter out to go get a Barbie doll and watch the movie, you should not do that. You should probably watch it first and see if you think it's fit for your child. There are sexual jokes in this movie.
Sorry, you cut out. There was what kind of jokes?
There's like probably 10 or 15 sexual jokes in this movie that you would not expect. It's very funny, though. I think the Ken storyline is good. The movie could have been a 7.5 or an 8 if the ending made any sense. The ending, I think, just left a lot of things untied at the end. The only one that really gets a true ending is what the movie's about, is Barbie. But you look at Ken, who's a main character in this movie, it's Ryan Gosling, and also another guy, Michael Cera, plays Alan in this movie. Both of those guys don't really get endings, and I think that really takes away from this movie's rating. Overall, my initial response from this movie was a 5, and I usually give a 7 if a movie is like, I don't really like that much. And this movie, I think, is a 5. Maybe I'd go to a 6, but it's in between a 5 and a 6. And I think a lot of people would agree with that, as long as you've stayed off TikTok recently. In terms of if you've watched the movie and you go on TikTok right now, you're only going to see Barbie TikToks. And even before I watched the movie, that's all I saw. Good reviews. People were saying it's the best movie of the year. That is a bunch of crap.
That's a load of crap. All right. Well, I got to see Oppenheimer this weekend with the great Ronnie Night Train Lane, and of course his wife Bobby, and one of their friends, or actually another friend group of theirs. They're a couple, if I will. And it was great. Really enjoyed the movie. Saw it in IMAX, and man, I tell you what, that was one of those movies where I don't go out of my way to go buy a DVD by any means, but I would buy this on DVD. It was that good from start to finish. The entire storyline, it was very powerful. It was impactful. And just the detail along the way and the flashbacks, and Murphy, I think it's Cillian Murphy. He killed it as well as Robert Downey Jr. had a big role in this movie. And it was kind of, those were the two main characters. They even had Albert Einstein, of course, being portrayed in there as well. And the interaction between Dr. Oppenheimer and Albert Einstein, it was incredible from start to finish. And I mean, I'm not going to go watch it again in theater simply because it was a 3-hour movie. However, this is a movie that I would buy and watch it again and probably again because it was that good. And if you've not seen it, I highly recommend it. And if you're worried about, gruesome or, it being too gory, none of that whatsoever. There was a very small sex scene, probably like a minute or 2-minute sex scene, to be honest with you. But aside from that, some language, and that's it. Even when the explosion went on, it was more so when they were testing stuff than when, the bomb was dropped. So it was very interesting, and I highly recommend you go see that. And you guys can opine. Again, tweet us at TCM_pod. Follow us on Instagram as well. Subscribe. Hit the subscribe button right here on YouTube and hit the little bell button, I believe it is, and you can get notified every time we post something or comment. It's a great way to do business around here. But we appreciate you guys. Spence, any plans to go watch Oppenheimer anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm going to watch Mission Impossible soon, and then I'm going to watch Oppenheimer probably Tuesday of this week. So I'm excited for Mission Impossible, but I think I'm more excited for Oppenheimer because from you, I heard a 9.5. Isaac Pugh, I heard a 10, and then Muppet, I heard a 10 as well. So 3 reviews with the average being a 9.85 is pretty high. Probably the best reviews from 3 people that I trust with movies. At least the highest reviews that I've heard from any movie that they've ever watched. So a 10, and 9.5. I got to see that this week. I've got a free movie voucher. I'm probably not going to go see it in IMAX, even though I would like to see it in Mall, Georgia. I tried to the other day, but the 11 p.m. 70 millimeter was out, which is sad, but I'll watch it in Blairsville. I think it'll be okay. I don't think I like how loud it's going to be either way. So I'm going to go watch it in Blairsville this week, and I'll have a review for that and Mission Impossible.
Awesome. I did see Mission Impossible as well. I think I gave it a 9.2, so it's really good too. You're not going to be disappointed.
I'm excited.
All right, cool. All right, guys. Thank you guys for keeping up with TCM Pod. We do appreciate it. And that's it. We'll be back next week. No word regarding Patrick Johnson of the Eagles. Of course, training camp got underway, so I don't know if we got lucky with that regard. However, maybe before or just after the preseason, we'll be able to have him right here on the podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Peace.
Sayonara.